Okay, so that's the last of the 4 dimensions. And then the last point, the 5th point in the broader discussion, where's my paper? The 5th point in the broader discussion of, I lost my place. Oh, the 5th point in the broader discussion was to establish relationships. The 5th point was to establish, and that was 5 procedures for conducting narrative research. So and actually I need to move this thing up. So the first point was narrative research is best implemented among individuals, small groups. Number 2 was field text. Number 3 was contextualizing your research. Number 4 was the process of restoring. Number 5 is establish relationships with subjects, and I'll move this up in the final document. I should have had it up there first. So the 5th point is to establish relationships with your subjects. As I said in the discussion, I don't remember if it was this half or the first half, it's important that when we begin, excuse me, when you begin your research topic, and you select your participants, that you establish a relationship with these participants. Why is that important? Because establishing the relationship with the participant is going to create the discursive space that you're going to need in order to bring up points of meaning, of significance, of empathy, and it's that, along with how you analyze the data, code your research, and we'll get into that later, that's going to give the meaning, the significance to your research, right? Your findings are going to be derived in that, right? The idea of epiphanies, right? It's the first point. A says, look for epiphanies, drastic changes in the narrative, unexpected consequences of the narrative. An epiphany isn't really possible unless there is that discursive space that I was talking about before, right? So it's hard to, I wouldn't say impossible, but it's very, very difficult for an epiphany to arrive in your analysis, your interview, of whatever the story is that the participant is sharing with you, without there being that discursive space. Hey, you know what? I never thought of that. I never thought, it just came to me that ... Oh, I'm so glad you shared that ... Right? It's that's what you're looking for. You have to create a level of comfort with the participant, a level of informality, not to be informal, but a level of, not as formal, not rigid, a level of informality with the participant so that the participant feels comfortable enough to just talk freely. It's in that talking freely that epiphanies arrive, right? And what happens in the epiphany is that, oh, you know what, I just remembered, I hadn't remembered that in 30 years, but ... I'm so glad you asked me that question. Hey, I didn't think I was going to disclose this, but, and they tell you, right? The fact that they tell you this, right? The fact that they had this epiphany is a gem, right? As far as getting to the source of meaning, because at the end, all we're attempting to do is to make sense and locate the significance and find the meaning to the story, right? Because it's in that narrative somewhere, buried deep within all the complex things that they said, is something of underlying importance, right? And that meaning is almost always encapsulated in these little epiphanies, right? So when you go back to do your research findings, might be like a series of bullet points, but when you put all of that into sort of a uniform statement, right, it should just be like one solid sentence, maybe a larger sentence, but one solid sentence, which wraps up the significance, the importance, the theme of your research. And epiphanies help a lot to get to that, right? It's a means of really, really consolidating the significance of why I'm spending my time interviewing this individual. You want to make sure that you emphasize the historical context, which is important. We discussed that. And then lastly, reflect on how the research also affects the researcher. And this is the most important point, right? As a researcher engaged in narrative research or any qualitative research, it's almost impossible for you as a researcher. It's not necessarily impossible, but I mean, for me, I was personally changed by the research that I did. Obviously, my personal experience motivated my interest in genocide and Holocaust studies. And that's not something I'm going to disclose here. But whatever your interest might be, what you want to do is establish that relationship with the participant, right? So the participant, my participants survived the Holocaust. Obviously, I haven't survived anything to that level of violence, of evil, if you want to call it that. But I can say, hey, you know, here's my story. Here's some of the things that I went through. Here's why I'm interested in your story. Here's what I think I can do with the information that you give me. And you just make it very, very sort of approachable, right? If you come in there very, very pedantically, and you know you're the authority on subject X, and you're here to observe these primitive folk, or hear their stories and their sufferings, you know, you're not going to get. First of all, participants might not participate, and second of all, participants might not disclose as much as they would with others, right? So there's a lot of qualitative research is contingent on you, right? It's contingent on your approach, on your approachability, right? The more approachable you are, the better your interviews. The better your interviews, the better your research. The better your research, the more you have to offer to the community of scholars. So that concludes the section on this initial section on narrative research. As I said, I'm going to do six, I guess, modules, if you will. This will conclude narrative research. Next, I will be doing phenomenological research. Then I'll do participatory action research, grounded research, ethnography, and finally case study. So with that being said, I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my video. I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell. I'll see you next time.